guys, the news is just crazy and in abundance. I'm joined today by my guest, John Lott. He's become a regular on the program. Absolutely love his work, but we did not expect to be leading off, or at least I did not expect to be leading off with two shootings today. We're actually going to dive into probably a couple of columns of John's. One on trans violence, why it's way worse than the media is telling you. Also, the left is going, and they're kind of on a gun grabbing mission. They want to start with law abiding citizens and police officers. I want to talk about that a little bit with John. But first, before we get to those issues, I want to talk to him about the shootings that occurred today. And guys, I got to be totally honest with you. I was paying attention to the shooting that happened at the synagogue, and we'll get into that with John. And I had totally missed the shooting that occurred at Old Dominion the same day. So I want to bring John Lott on and get his take on both of these shootings right away here. John Lott, thank you for joining us. Of course, he's with the Crime Prevention Research Institute. I think I got it right this time, John. Crime Prevention Research Institute.
Research
Anyway,
Center, Research
Okay.
Center. But anyway, okay,
So I did it.
no
All
problem.
right. Okay. All right. So give us your take here, John.
Well, it looks, my own guess is that these two attacks today are at least tangentially related. The Old Dominion, the guy was shouting Allah Akbar. He's had connections with ISIS in the past. He had been sentenced to a prison term, but had been released early with a pardon by Biden. He's a naturalized citizen. I assume the guy who did the attack at the Jewish synagogue today was also, you know, of a similar vein. And you know, we have, and apparently he was also a naturalized citizen. So, we probably want to think a little bit more carefully about who we're bringing into the country.
And honestly, it's such a simple and I'm concerned that we're going to see more and more of this. Obviously, with what's transpiring in the Middle East with the Iran
Right.
conflict, and I think the United States is kicking some booty, despite with many in the media or what they're trying to portray. I'm not trying to pretend like this is going to be an easy thing, but I think that we're having great success in Iran. So is Israel, and I think that it'll pay off in the long run dividends where our men won't have to go back. But meanwhile, we are going to have to fight a lot of these people, I believe, sadly, that are some of these gotaways or some of these people that were allowed into the country by the Biden administration. And we just don't know when they're going to pop up. I'm curious. I want to ask you this, John, because I know that we're kind of on high alert for sleeper cells as a result of what's happening in Iran, but I'm not so sure that I'm that concerned, and maybe I should be, about sleeper cells as much as I am the lone wolf, like these attacks that seem to be popping up. I mean, obviously, what happened today, we saw in, what was it, Austin, Texas, a week or two ago, the guy that shot up the
Right.
people at the bar. So I'm a little
Right.
concerned about that.
Well, I think that's reasonable to be concerned. I also think that it's one reason why people should carry their permanent concealed handguns when they're out in public. There's so many potential targets. You can't have police there all the time, and having police in uniform, they face real tactical disadvantages in stopping these attacks. If somebody's thinking about shooting up a place, and they see an officer in uniform, they can either wait for the officer to leave the area before they attack, or they can move on to another target themselves. You only have like 220,000 or so officers on duty at any point in time. That's a lot to cover 300 and almost 50 million people out there. And, uh, you know,
John, hold on
and
just a
for
second.
they
That number just blew me away. I did not realize I I did not realize that law enforcement was spread so thin. I don't know why that hit me the way that it did, but it did. That is a shocking number to me. But go ahead. I apologize to interrupt you
Yeah, well,
there.
I mean, we have about 670,000 law enforcement in the country, but you have less than a third on duty at any point in time when you
Fair.
consider vacations and other issues that are there. And obviously, not everybody's on the street. That includes, staff and other people, administrative people. So you're talking about something that's around 220,000. Uh, so you're asking a lot. There's like one officer for every, I don't know, almost 1,500 people that they have to go and try to protect. And so they can't be there all the time. And not o- and the fact that they're in uniform makes it difficult for them to stop attacks because the criminals will see who's there before they engage in their attack, and they can wait, as I said, for them to either leave or move on to another target themselves. Or if they're going to insist on attacking while the officer's there, who do you think they shoot first? They're going to shoot
Okay.
the officer first. We recently completed a study looking at all the active shooting attacks in the United States from 2014 through 2024. And what you find is that police actually stopped fewer of those attacks than concealed carry permit holders for the first two reasons that I gave in part. But even though they stopped fewer attacks, they were 12 times more likely to get killed in those attacks than concealed carry permit holders were. Because, having somebody in uniform is kind of like having a neon sign above them that shoots them, say, shoot me first. Look,
Wow.
uh, I'll give you a simple example. We have air marshals on planes.
Sure.
Does anybody think an air marshal ought to be in uniform?
No.
I don't know anybody who thinks air marshals should be in uniform, and the answer is pretty obvious why that's the case. If you have an air marshal in uniform and you happen to have terrorists on the plane, you've basically told the terrorist who it is that they have to go and take out. And so it makes the job of the air marshal basically impossible. And so nobody would ever put air marshals in uniform. And having police, there are benefits from having police in uniform. There's no doubt about that. But when you're talking about these types of attacks, uh, you have to realize that they have really difficult jobs. I don't think most people appreciate what an incredibly difficult job they have.
John, I'm going to ask you what is I believe a rhetorical question, but it's insane to me that I mean we're just not speaking the truth about this. And then I want to get into your column. The real rate of transgender violence is much worse than the media wants to admit, because I think this is a very important topic too. But obviously, I think the real rate of Islamic violence inside of the United States is much worse than the media wants to admit. Again, I mean, just looking at Old Dominion, I'll check on the synagogue that was hit as
Right.
well, but my suspicions are leaning that way, that it was probably somebody at least sympathetic to Iran or to the IRCG. And again, the Colorado shooting, the New York City attempted bombing
Bombings.
that the New
Right.
York City mayor refused to call out. John, do we have a problem, a bigger problem with white supremacy inside of the United States, white supremacists being domestic terrorists, or do we have a bigger problem with Islamic terrorism that we seem to ignore, quite frankly?
Right. Well, at our website, we go and break this down for things like mass public shootings. And what you find is that Middle Eastern individuals are overrepresented by, I think, a factor of seven compared to their share of the population in terms of these attacks. So, they're very overrepresented in these attacks. If you look at whites generally, they make up slightly more than half of these mass public shootings, but they make up non-Middle Eastern whites make up about 65% of the population. So in fact, they're somewhat underrepresented. And when you're looking at kind of the motivations that are there, the vast majority, over 70% of mass public shooters are simply suicidal individuals who have no real political views. You're talking about maybe about 8% or so that have some type of white supremacist type views, but half of those, more than half, are actually environmentalist, leftist types. They go at, whether it be the Walmart shooting in El Paso or other
Right.
attacks, they are upset, the Buffalo grocery store shooter or others, they are upset about people having too many kids, and they are convinced that minorities are having too many children and that having children damages the environment. I mean, these are guys who are left wing environmental nutsos who and basically it's not just here. You can go to the Christchurch shooting in New Zealand. That there was a guy who his his ideal form of government was communist China. He was upset about immigrants having too many kids. Uh, but the media portrayed him as kind of a right winger type person. Um, it's what you see all the time here, unfortunately, and the media hides the fact that these guys are you just don't see kind of the white supremacist right winger types out there that Biden and others were pushing.
Yeah, okay. We are speaking to John R. Lott, Jr. of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Back with more. We want to get into trans violence after the break. This is the Carl Jackson Show. Stay tuned. All right, I'm back with my guest, John R. Lott. John R. Lott Jr. We were having a fantastic conversation offline here. I'm not even sure if honestly, I just asked John a question during the break about election integrity because I wanted to talk about the Save America Act, but I planned to talk about it after I was done with this interview with him, and then I just happened to remember that he wrote I believe it was a research paper that I read anyway, and obviously he's done more extensive research on election integrity. And so you guys have got to check it out at crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. I don't know if he'll have time to talk about it because I brought him on to talk about this trans violence, but now we've had the shooting at Old Dominion. We've had the shooting at the synagogue, the synagogue as well. And so I wanted to bring him on and talk about that as well. But now I want to transition, and that's weird. That's a good segue. I want to transition to trans violence. Again, John R. Lott with the Crime Prevention Research Center, crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. Okay, John, the real rate of transgender violence is much worse than the media wants to admit. There was a shooting in Canada that happened recently. Obviously, we saw some people the video of the shooting in Rhode Island. What you could see, and it was obvious that the guy was. I mean, let's just be blunt. These people are not mentally healthy. The father that murdered his family inside of the ice rink. I mean, the guy looked like he was a bodybuilder, and he happened to have some female parts, and then he would ride a Harley Davidson looking like a dude. It's the craziest thing ever. Why is it that the mainstream media refuses to talk about this as you outlined? The New York Times, AP, CNN, Washington Post, they ignore this stuff.
Right. Well, with the Rhode Island shooter, for some reason, a lot of the news coverage, as you just mentioned, the Associated Press, CNN, New York Times, ABC, NBC, were among the outlets that just didn't think it was newsworthy to go and mention that the individual was a trans killer. For the Canadian attack, the Associated Press uh, refused to mention that the individual was transgender. Um, I assume they will go and argue that they don't want to demonize a particular group of people. But, as you and I have talked about before, uh, when it comes to things like whether the media will go and report that these guys are explicitly picking gun-free zones as their targets, if we're going to stop attacks, we have to kind of understand what's motivating people, what's causing them to pick the targets that they do, what's maybe behind them in some sense. And it's one reason for looking to see whether or not transgender individuals are greatly disproportionate in terms of the rate that they're committing these attacks. Um, there are two types of data that we looked at on this. One is what the FBI calls active shooting attacks. These are instances where guns fired in public, not part of some other type of crime like a robbery or a gang fight over drug turf. Anything from one person being shot at and missed all the way up to mass public shooting. And if you look in 2024, for example, what you find is that transgender shooters' share of these active shooting attacks was at least 12 times their share of the population. Now, there have been a lot of reports from the Associated Press and PolitiFact and other fact checkers out there who go and claim that transgenders are not committing these attacks at a high rate. But there's a lot of problems with what they're doing, basic statistical problems. So, for one thing, they don't adjust for their share of the population. If I have a group that commits 10% of the attacks,
Wow.
the media says, well, that's only 10%. That's not very much.
Sure.
But the problem is that if make up 1% or less of the population, that's a pretty big gap that's there. That seems to me disproportionate. You need to take into account. The other thing that they do is they include a lot of attacks in kind of the denominator there that aren't relevant. So there's data put out by a gun control group called the Gun Violence Archive, which goes and counts mass shootings. They basically will include cases where three or more people are wounded.
Sure.
The problem is that about 85% of their cases involve drug gangs fighting against each other over things like drug turf. The vast majority, the rest of them are robberies. Now, robberies and gang fights over drug turf are important, but what motivates somebody to go into a public place with the sole desire to go and kill other people, all right, is very different. You can, and you see this in the media.
Yeah.
You may have gang shootings in Chicago over the weekend. Maybe 30 people got shot, but that's not the lead on the national news. If somebody goes into a movie theater or a mall or a grocery store or a restaurant or a school with the sole desire to go and kill as many people as possible, that will get national news. And that's the reason why the FBI, in their definition of active shootings, separates out those types of gang fights or robberies from other types of crimes. And mass public shootings are like active shooting data, except for it limits it to cases where four or more people have been killed. And what you find is that over the period of time from 2018 through 2025, transgender individuals are overrepresented compared to their share of the population by at least sixfold. So those are significant differences that are there, and it's really kind of statistical malpractice not to do basic things like adjust for the share of the group in the population.
I'm noticing a trend here, John, and you've covered them all, frankly, on the times that you've been on air with me. But it seems like I remember us discussing the crimes that illegal immigrants commit as opposed to
Right.
legal immigrants, and the media or statisticians or whomever tried to lump them together. Seems like they're doing the same when it comes to trans violence. And then, honestly, I mean, just speaking of, I remember former FBI Director Christopher Wray. Our biggest threat is white domestic terrorism and stuff like that. And yet, the people that do seem to be committing these mass shootings that happen to be white, oftentimes these people have been treated for mental disorders or what have you. But also, as you mentioned, they're supporting radical left wing causes. So it seems to me that the people that tend to be the mass shooters tend to lean to the left, and perhaps that's why the media doesn't want to be honest about this stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to get into people's minds. What I will say is that the vast majority of these mass public shooters really have no ideology. You just have individuals who are suicidal,
Fair
who
enough.
feel unappreciated, and they want to get media attention. And I mean, people have always wanted to commit suicide, but someplace along the line, 30 years ago or so, they realized that they could get a lot of news attention, that people would know that they were here if they went and tried to kill as many people as they could. And if anybody reads the diaries or manifestos, you'll see this guy will say things. If I can only kill more people than such and such did, I can get even more media attention. And it's the reason why they talk about going to places like gun-free zones, because they know if they can kill more people, they can get more media attention. If they go to a place where victims aren't able to go and defend themselves, they're going to be able to go and kill more people and get more of the media attention that they crave. So, These guys may be crazy in some sense, but they're not stupid. Now, I mean, you'll have like 8% or so have some type of racist ideology, but as you say, most of those individuals are basically left wingers who are environmentalists, but the media just refuses to go and cover that part of their diaries and manifestos. They'll mention that they're white supremacists, but they don't say that they hate minorities because they think minorities are having too many kids, and having kids damages the environment. I don't know about you, but I guess I don't know a lot of right wingers who are upset about people having kids. I don't
That's true.
know a lot of right wingers whose ideal form of government is communist China, or call themselves eco terrorists, or go and call themselves mild manner authoritarian leftists. Somebody calls themselves a leftist, I kind of assume that they don't consider themselves to be of the right. But the way the media looks at it is, if somebody is racist, then they're automatically on the right, even if they call themselves a socialist or like communist China or whatever.
Real quick here, John, 30 seconds or less here. Obviously, trans violence is an issue. I mean, are these people showing up at, psychiatric counselors' offices or whatever? I mean, is there a way to try to prevent this, in your opinion? What can we do to curtail this trans violence?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that trans individuals are suicidal at a very high rate compared to the general population.
Okay.
So, given how so many of these mass public shooters are suicidal, it's not surprising to me that they're overrepresented in that group.
All right. Get them some suicidal treatment. Guys, we'll be back. The Carl Jackson Show. Stay tuned.